Well, public schools countrywide will close for a month, this from the 27th of July. This all the while matriculants will be off for a week. The closure followed growing calls from teachers, unions and other sectors to shut schools as COVID-19 infections soar. But where does this then leave private schools? Joining me now via Skype is Lebogang Montjane, the Independent Schools Association of South Africa's Executive Director. Mr. Montjane, thank you so much for your time and welcome to ENCA. Now, there is so much debate going on. I'm sure you have witnessed it, this also on social media, following the President's announcement, particularly him making mention of public schools closing. You know, they'll be closing for 4 weeks, matriculants for a week. And this begs the question then, what happens to private schools? Do they remain open?
In our understanding, yes, Jamila, our independent schools can remain open during the public schools are closed. But we must remember that independent schools, as the minister says, have different calendars. So even though the president is closing schools as of the Monday of the 24th, independent schools who are three-term were actually going to end on Friday the 31st. And interestingly enough, they open up on the 24th of August, the same day the president is going to be opening up public schools.
So what about the concerns that some teachers have, raised just in terms of, safety and sanitization, but also particularly that worry that the peak is upon us, where we'll be seeing more cases of, COVID-19 within the country? Does this mean that teachers within independent schools are exempt from those concerns?
I think that exactly is the nub of the question. I think that's why the president has felt that he had to do what he had to do. Independent schools, because we have to be registered both under the Constitution and under the South African Schools Act. Infrastructurally, we're able to actually manage COVID-19 relatively safely. We can do the social distancing, we can do the monitoring, we can do the screening. Our ablution facilities can make sure that we've got papers, sanitizers, and etc. So I think that is actually why I suspect that the president had to close public schools, because not all of them could do so. But certainly their quintile 4 or 5 schools are just as able as we are.
Right. So are you saying then and confirming that independent schools are well equipped, well prepared for the peak that is upon us, meaning that all the pupils, staff members, teachers that are, of course, part of independent schools within South Africa do not have to worry about this particular peak that even the World Health Organization tells us about?
Certainly, they do not have to worry, because also something else that independent schools have now become a feature of is that we actually are not all back at school. So there's no independent school that has the full complement of students on campus. We have a combination of both at the moment. So we have online and contact, and what is happening is that as the contact comes in, it's reduced number of pupils. So as the minister would say, we're using a platooning system and a combined system. So in effect, if your child is going to school in an independent school, they're not going to be finding themselves in a school full of all the pupils at the same time.
Right. So then how effective, Mr. Montjane, is the online learning system that currently you have introduced as independent schools within South Africa? We've heard, of course, some lamenting that public schools particularly haven't mastered yet the online system. This due to various challenges here. We could be talking about the digital divide. We could be talking about the lack of, devices that not all, learners have access to. But in independent schools, have you mastered e-learning for your learners?
We have, and I think that we must also emphasize that even in public schools, they have schools that have mastered online learning. So I really think it's quite important for us to remember that fact, that not only independent schools have done so, but also we have low-fee independent schools that are able, that have had to also use online learning and using WhatsApps and SMS rather than, say, tablets or computers. But I think that this speaks to the other national issue that we have to look at, Dumelo, is data costs in South Africa. They are extraordinarily expensive, and we need to address that, because even public schools are facing those same similar challenges. Whilst our Indian counterparts, they have not had to worry about online for both public and independent, because data costs are so much cheaper in India.
Absolutely. I want to touch on the previous point that you made mention of, that not all learners are back at independent schools. There's still a huge chunk of some learners who are at home using and utilizing e-learning. Are you saying as well that parents that have their children at independent school can still decide and choose to have their children remain at home and continue with e-learning at home, or are you of the perspective that all learners need to return back to, the infrastructure that is school, so that you can monitor better, the learners' academic year and their progress and tests and exams and so forth?
What I'm pleased to say that my membership has come back to me and said, hey, now when the president reopened schools and our Minister of Education did so under his authority, when we've come back to actually benchmark to see how effective online learning was, the vast majority of schools are saying actually we have not lost any school days, and that actually independent schools are up to date in terms of the curriculum as set out. So I think that is something that we are now seeing. And really what I'm also saying to parents now, we as a membership now understand blended learning is now for us going to be here forever. We're always going to have Google Classrooms or any other kind of platform. So that this is going to be the new way that education moves forward in the 21st century.
Well, I thank you so much for this conversation, Mr. Lebogang Montjane from the Independent Schools Association of South Africa. He is the Executive Director there.
Sure. I'm a bit enraged, though, Tumela, I must say, at the fact that you have some leaders in our society who are criticizing, the private schools, criticize the inequality that this builds, right? And I always make the example that the poor pupils who are not going to be able to go to public schools,
right,
if you were to track what happens in the coming decades, some of them may end up falling out of school. We have a high dropout rate as it is, and this could exacerbate the situation. This will lead to situations where those who go to private schools and independent schools end up in better positions in future in our society and in the economy. And I always use the example of those who miss out on education will be calling those who go to independent schools in a few decades, will be calling them Ngamla. Make a plan for me, Ngamla. We are perpetuating these inequalities. But for some of our political leaders to act like they're just waking up to this disparity now is actually outrageous.
Yeah, you were making mention of the fact that this was 26 years in the making. There was ample time, to see, the huge gap that we have between public and private schools. And if it was not for the continuous corruption that puts the vulnerable at a disadvantage, where children in public schools then today do not have access, equal access that is, to their academics, to their books, to their education, as those in independent schools, is quite worrying.
Read the National Education Infrastructure Management System report, the department's own word, their own assessment of where things stand across the 23,000 schools, 23 to 24,000 schools across the country.
Yeah.
Then you tell me, who's been perpetuating this divide between those who are poor and rich? And by the way, independent schools don't only accommodate the rich and privileged. There are many ordinary civil servants who have come to the conclusion that, what choice do I have? What choice do I have? I will sacrifice.
Yes.
The principal's offices are busy. The finance offices are busy with parents being followed up every month.
Yeah, for debt.
When are you making payment?
Yes,
when are you making
for
payment?
debt.
But they will do anything to keep their children in those schools because the system is not working.
The system works against, children in this regard.